In this video, we're going to focus upon revising crimes, their nature, i.e. the type of crime that they actually are, and their motives for being regarded as serious in the medieval time period. Now, we split this era into 3 areas for our specification. So we've got the Anglo-Saxon period, which we start looking at from 1000 to 1066. Obviously, it started before. After 1066, we look at the crimes specifically related to the Normans, and then we're going to jump forward to the end of the medieval era and look at the final few crimes between 1300 and 1500. Now, our most important key term that we're going to use today is the nature of something. So if we're looking for a synonym, then we would say the type of something. Secondly, the other factors that we need to keep in mind today are the key reasons why crimes became more important and less important in the reigns of different monarchs. So the 2 most common reasons that we have for crimes being taken seriously in the medieval era are the power of the king or the queen, so crimes against authority really, and religion. So again, that is a crime against authority, particularly as they give the king or queen their authority. We also need to think about money, landowners' power, the invention of the printing press, that comes later, so for spreading stories, and population increases or decreases, which is important at the end of our era with the Black Death. So all of these are important reasons over the whole time period why laws are made. Now we're going to pick out the ones that are specifically there for our medieval era. So to put our Anglo-Saxon laws into context, we need to remind ourselves about the way Anglo-Saxon society was set up. And if we understand what's important to society, this is going to help us to understand why some crimes were seen as serious. So part of being a successful king was maintaining that law and order. So being the highest justiciar in the land, the one that would make the laws and make judgments on them. So another term for king that we have is signing. And these were often the most powerful noblemen with the most wealth and the possibility of raising a large army. So it wasn't always the first son of a king who was likely to inherit. So to help the king rule, they have powerful earls and thanes. So this is like the equivalent of our Norman lords. You can see the thane there, who are in charge locally. Ceorls were freemen, farmers, and independent landed householders. So these are again important for loyalty and to remain loyal, keeping people loyal in the hierarchy. So challenging a king directly in Anglo-Saxon times is treason. Challenging their beliefs is also heresy. So thinking about linking in with the church there. And these are serious crimes. So it could see you stripped of your land. If not, obviously, if it was very serious in a rebellion, then you would be dead. So if you lose your land from acting disloyally, then you're going to be in big trouble, aren't you, from trying to feed your family. So it's going to put you into poverty pretty quickly. So what we can conclude from this is land is going to be quite important in the Anglo-Saxon crimes. So you could be fined for neglecting your land. Moving areas without permission of your lord is serious. Obviously, you're challenging his authority there. And if you claim a debt and then you change your mind, you're going to lose your house as well. So all of these are linked in with the land and are seen to maybe challenge people's authority. Now, as we said earlier, peace is also really important. It is the start of our era. If an Anglo-Saxon is killed, then a blood feud means that a member of that family has the right to kill the person who's killed the Anglo-Saxon, but this causes a vicious circle. So this is seen really as compensation, but quickly changes to compensation with money, with the Wehrgilt. Now, a nobleman's life is worth 300 shillings, whereas a freeman's life is worth 100 shillings. So anyone who has no relatives, then half of the money is sent to the king and half is given to the village. So we've got compensation there. So yet again, it's about maybe deterring people, but putting things right. Theft is also an important challenge to authority. So if you stole from the king, you had to pay 9 times the value of something for their compensation. And if you steal from a freeman, then you've obviously got to pay 3 times the value of something for that compensation as well. So in 1066, we have a big change in leadership with William, Duke of Normandy, defeating Harold Godwinson at Hastings and taking over the country. Now you can see from the map that he isn't able to do it straight away. Now, unlike the previous Anglo-Saxon kings, who we said earlier have large areas of land for income and to get an army from, William hasn't got this in England. So you can see from the map that it obviously takes him a while to conquer the country, so it's going to be important for him to stamp his authority on the country and get everyone following his laws. So he wants to use the same methods to control people in a hierarchy, and they call this obviously the feudal system, where we can see that our tenants-in-chief are up here, are our lords, our earls, our barons, etc., and they're running large areas of land for him. They in turn then rent the land out to the under-tenants-in-chief, so they are the knights, who we would know maybe as the lords, and in turn, again, they're made loyal by the threat of their loss of land, and also giving William service in his army for at least 40 days, and providing with him with an army if they need to. So from this system, we can see that William is clearly trying to stop challenges to his authority, and anything that does challenge his authority is going to be taken very seriously. Now, he also needs to use religion to show that he was chosen by God, and if you question him, you're questioning God. So he made having beliefs different to him an important crime as well. So heresy is how we describe that, where he challenged the beliefs of the king and maybe challenged the teachings of the church. So in these ways, he isn't any different to our Anglo-Saxons. Okay, so some of these crimes he obviously carries on, the same from the Anglo-Saxons. So anyone living outside of his control, fleeing from justice, are outlaws. And if you're a man, then you're an outlaw. If you're a woman, you're called waived, and you could be killed on sight. So this is quite a harsh punishment. But when you're living outside of his control and clearly a serious threat, then clearly he's going to want to deter that. Likewise, gangs of outlaws weren't nice. Robbery, extortion, and violent crimes are also their way of operating. Now, clearly carrying on with Anglo-Saxon laws of treason and heresy are important, as we said earlier, and neglecting your land is important as well. So in this era, you weren't allowed to move on without your lord say so. You had to become a free man. So crimes that he introduces that are similar but evolved when he makes his changes are the idea of compensation. So obviously in Anglo-Saxon times we have the fair guild, but if a Norman was killed, then the whole village is subject to a large payable fine to the king, and this is called the murdrum fine. Now this meant that sometimes they tried to get rid of bodies further down the river because they didn't want to pay the actual fine, and it is similar to Anglo-Saxon times in its compensation, but the difference is it's deterring people from acting against the Normans and acting against William's authority. So clearly, killing a Norman is a crime against William's authority. Now, as we said earlier, land was also really important, and he makes changes to those laws. So the law of the Mund says that you've got the right to the peace on the land around your house. Now, William changes this. So technically, in the feudal system, he's going to own all of the land in England, which he will then dole out to his earls, his tenants-in-chief, they will dole out to the under-tenants-in-chief. So he actually loves to hunt. And kept the New Forest and some other areas called the Royal Demps for his exclusive hunting rights. So new laws come into being which were essentially against hunting. He would call it poaching. So these are called the forest laws. So ordinary people before had been able to forage for food and materials. So fallen wood, they've been able to graze their animals on this land. This all now stops. If you are caught with a dog, with a bow, or having gathered anything from the king's land, then this is poaching, and you will be severely punished. So mutilation, so it might be cutting off your fingers. If it's more than once, it might be castration. That was his favourite punishment. But it was all about deterring people from taking from William. So clearly a challenge to his authority. So the nature of crimes, as we can see in Norman times, is very much about challenging the king's authority. So moving on to our later medieval era then. The threats to the authority and landowners are once again key in crimes being taken seriously. The Black Death meant that there are less labourers around and people are able to ask for higher wages or choose their employers. So this is clearly a threat to the authority of the landowners, and landowners don't like this. So they get the king to change the law in something called the Statute of Labourers of 1348, which means you can't move freely between employers or ask for higher wages. Now, the church is also being questioned at this time. So they also want harsher heresy laws as well. This means that you can be arrested by the King's Justice of the Peace for questioning the church practices. So once again, this is questioning authority, and the church are that worried by it that they started to burn people at the stake to purify your soul. So we can see that there is a lot of continuity between the medieval rulers, and it's all realistically about worrying about their authority being questioned, and this is why crimes which threaten them are seen as so serious. So there were changes depending upon the circumstances of the rulers, but again, these often show what the ruler felt threatened by and actually threatened their power specifically.